A lot of investors I partner with have one major challenge. They are busy professionals that love to create memories with their families, but are too busy to actively look and find value-add real estate that cash flows. Hey guys, I'm John Fortes, and I want to partner with you. I provide investment opportunities through apartment syndications that allow my partners to invest passively so they don't have to worry about trading more time for money. If you are interested in creating passive streams of income, wealth creation, and all the tax benefits that come along with investing through real estate, I encourage you to fill out the form at www.investwithfortes.com. Invest today so that tomorrow you can trade money for time. Once again, that's www.investwithfortes.com. And I can't wait to partner with you.
Are you a busy professional looking to diversify your portfolio? Ever wanted to passively invest in real estate but don't know where to start? John Fortes provides you with a guide to passively invest in real estate. This is the Passive Investor Show.
And now, the Passive Investor Show. Here's your host, John Fortes.
Hello, PI listeners. Thank you for lending me your time today. Welcome to the Passive Investor Show. I'm John Fortes. Our goal is to provide you, the busy professional, with passive investing tips and tricks for your real estate investments to leverage more time for you to focus on your true passions. Let's get to work. Welcome, PI listeners. Welcome back. I appreciate you for joining me again. Today we have a special guest with Paul Moore. He is the podcast host of How to Lose Money. Paul, thank you for joining me.
Hey, thanks for having me on here. And why would you want to interview somebody whose show is called How to Lose Money, John?
We're going to get into that, Paul. Let me get there. I appreciate you. But Paul, can you give me the too long didn't read version of your bio? Just fill us in what you are, what you do, and who you are.
Yeah, I got an engineering degree and then I got an MBA from Ohio State, went to work at Ford Motor Company and realized that I was really born and designed to be an entrepreneur. So I quit Ford after 5 years, started my own staffing firm. That went really well, sold it, and then got really, really bored and didn't know really what to do. And then I jumped into real estate. I've done all kinds of real estate investing. Flipping waterfront lots, building houses, doing a subdivision, flipped dozens and dozens of single family homes. And I realized that I was just working for a paycheck rather than really building wealth. And so finally in 2011, we built a multifamily facility to house oil workers in North Dakota. And that was when I jumped into commercial, and honestly, I would never go back. I'm now a managing partner with Wellings Capital. We are an investment fund that allows people to passively invest in the very best commercial recession-resistant assets that we can find.
I love that. I want to get into the mindset of how people find you at Welling, but let's talk about a little bit more of what you do. What decided that real estate was going to be it when you sold your company? Did you just get bored or?
Yeah, honestly, it wasn't really a noble story. What happened is I started a nonprofit organization to reach out to international students studying in the US. And that was really fun, but it just wasn't, it wasn't enough. I mean, there was just not that much work involved in it. And a friend of mine had been doing home maintenance and apartment maintenance for like 15 years. And he moved to town and he said, hey, we could probably buy houses on the courthouse steps in this thing called a foreclosure sale, which I'd never heard of, for maybe pennies on the dollar or maybe less than 50 cents on the dollar. So we rushed down to the courthouse steps a few days later. We made our first purchase, made a lot of money on that deal very quickly. And we thought, this is easy. And then we thought we could do one house a week. Well, we soon learned it wasn't easy, but that is how we got started.
That's awesome. So you mentioned how you developed a multifamily for what, oil workers?
Yeah, we developed a multifamily for oil workers in the Bakken. You know, the average, if you went across the nation, John, the average rent is about $1 per square foot per month. So in other words, an 800 square foot apartment might rent for, somewhere in the range of $800 a month. We were renting for $13 per square foot per month. We had 300 square foot. Now, these were fully furnished, all utilities paid efficiencies, but we were renting for these 300 square foot beautiful efficiencies for 4,000 or so, more or less, per month. And the oil companies were gladly paying it to get housing for these oil workers.
So how'd you fall into that? Like, development is a different animal. So how'd you find your way into that?
Yeah, so I had a petroleum engineering degree. And so in 2010, when I was sort of lost trying to figure out what to do in real estate, I made a large investment in oil and gas in North Dakota, thinking I knew what I was doing. And I lost money on that deal, and so did all my friends. But while we were there, we realized there was no housing. There were guys sleeping in their trucks and cheap RVs and even their cars, in Walmart parking lots, leaving the car running all night, trying to stay warm. And so we realized there was a massive housing shortage. So that's how we jumped in. My friend and I had both been involved in real estate, both been in development. So we decided to jump in and try it, and it worked really well.
Awesome. So you had previous experience that led you to be able to have the confidence to build that. That's awesome. I appreciate you for sharing. Now, real quickly, have you ever passively invested yourself? And if so, how was that experience for you?
Yeah. Well, I have, and I have to think back. I made some bad investments along the way that were passive, and I think it was chasing shiny object syndrome, failing to see the difference between investing and speculating. John, investing is when your principal is generally safe and you've got a chance to make a return. Speculating is when your principal is not at all safe and you've got a chance to make a return. And I did a lot of the speculating thing, and I made a lot of money, but I lost more money, and I'd be far wealthier today if I'd have listened to Warren Buffett's, philosophy on investing, which is, rule number 1 and 2, don't lose money. But more recently, after doing some investments in multifamily, writing a book called The Perfect Investment about multifamily investing, I decided I was better off being a passive investor. But there's a passive investor, which is somebody who just sends money to somebody. But then there's a professional passive investor, and that's somebody who, and actually, believe it or not, Warren Buffett is sort of that. Now think about it. Buffett's the most successful investor of all time, at least to our knowledge. And he does not make ice cream. He does not write insurance policies. He doesn't build mobile homes, but he invests in companies who do. He trusts the management teams of those companies who do. And so that's exactly what we're doing. Wellings Capital spends an enormous amount of time vetting syndicators, vetting operators with recession-resistant assets like self-storage and mobile home parks, and to some degree apartments, though they've been overheated for years. And we invest with them. When we invest in their deals, we are basically being a professional passive investor, and we're allowing our investors to be passive investors, if that makes sense.
Oh, I really love that. You're a professional passive investor. I love that. I love the way you just framed that. Thank you. So I think we're getting closer to figuring out your podcast name, How to Lose Money. Can you dive into how you came up with that name?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would go to conferences and events over the years, and I would, let's sit around a round table, let's say, and we would listen to these wonderful speakers, and they would tell of their great successes. And they were successful. They were truly successful. But I would look at the guys sitting around the round table, and we do the breakout sessions, and I would see their shoulders slump. And I would see him kind of be like, we can't really replicate that. I don't know how I could ever do that. I've got a lot of fear and failure, and I haven't got the money, and I haven't got this and that advantage they had. Well, I got to know some of these speakers as I became a speaker myself, and I realized, wait a minute, these guys had the same pain, the same fears, the same failures, the same losses that everybody else had. They just persisted through. And so I decided it would be great to start a podcast to investigate and to talk about the pain, loss, failures, and the reputations lost, the relationships lost, etc., that come with the road to success. Because every single successful person I've ever spoken to has had those pains along the way. And I've found that people are far more encouraged when they realized, oh, Darren Hardy lost 178,000 too after he had made millions on his previous venture. Well, if that's the case, I feel like there's hope for me.
Yeah, that's pretty powerful, sharing the lessons learned. I love that.
Yeah.
Now, I love, Paul, that you're a professional passive investor. Can you give me a few tips that a passive investor would, what would you caution a passive investor to do prior and during an investment?
Yeah. So I would say this: if you're going to give 25, 50,000, 100,000 or more to somebody, you really want to get to know them. I think it's worth doing a video call with them at the very, very least. And then I would say you should do 10 or 20 different background checks on them. Now that sounds intense, but seriously, you should do a criminal check. You should Google their name all over the place, Google their company's names. You should find out, are there any SEC violations? Do they have any felony charges? But you should also see how they talk about their employees and their spouse, and how they speak to the waiter and this flight attendant. So to do that, you might have to travel to see them or have them travel to see you. And you should get to know them really, really well. And you should look at all their assumptions, ask them about their debt philosophies, ask them, all kinds of hard questions. I guess what I'm saying is dive deep if you're a passive investor to the point where you really, really know who you're going to get in trouble with. Because let's be honest, John, investing comes with a lot of trouble. And you got to ask yourself, do I really want to be in trouble with this person for the next 5 or 10 or 15 years? Do I trust that they're going to have my best interests in mind? So ask the hard questions, do the due diligence. Don't necessarily invest with the first person you talk to.
I love those points. Now, how about I'm comfortably investing? What should I do ongoing? What practices should I do?
After you're invested?
Yes.
Yeah, I think you should really, that's one thing you should ask up front. How often do you do reporting? And I think you should hold them to that. If they start slipping, or if they stop not returning emails or phone calls, dig in, find out what's going on. We have one investment that's not part of our Wellings funds, but a previous investment that we're not real happy with. So we just flew there without announcing it recently. And then we actually went one day there and then the next day to the company headquarters not to storm in and confront them, not at all, but to sit down with them and say, hey, what's going on here? This doesn't seem like something's right here. The cost of that flight and that hotel and everything, was in the hundreds of dollars. Well worth it for, a large investment.
That's awesome. Always checking up and making sure you're holding them to what their standards were when you invested with them. I like that.
Right.
I like that. Now, Paul, is there any tips or tricks that you can give us, whether it's business or passive investor? It doesn't matter. Any books that you could recommend? What do you have? Like, what can you share?
So one thing I would recommend is that you look at how Warren Buffett invests in stocks. Even if you're a real estate investor, I think there's a lot to learn. So I spent the last 2.5 hours this morning studying some Buffett principles, some Buffett investments he made. There's a gold mine of information, and there's so much out there. I mean, CNBC, I think it is, has their own whole Warren Buffett website where it has all kinds of quotes and stories and letters. Buffett himself has published his own letters from Berkshire Hathaway since I think the late 60s. They're all available at their website, easy to index. That's one thing. Secondly, I would remind people that everybody needs a coach. You know, if Tiger Woods needs a coach, if Tom Brady needs a coach, if the best people in the world need coaches, you probably do too. And I just signed up for my third very expensive coaching program in my life. The first two cost $25,000, and I got more than my money's worth out of both of those. This one's going to end up costing much more, but highly recommend that. As far as books, I'd recommend a book called The One Thing by Gary Keller, the world's most successful real estate broker. Gary Keller and Jay Papasan wrote The One Thing, and they've got a lot of other information and resources out there. And the point of that is staying focused. That's the really important thing about that. The last thing I would say is really understand the difference between being an entrepreneur and an investor. You know, as an entrepreneur, we take risks. We're on the cutting edge. We're thinking like Elon Musk. You know, how can we mine elements from the stars and get to Mars and all that stuff? But as investors, we'd be far better off to be much more boring. Paul Samuelson is the first Nobel Peace Prize winner from the US in economics, and he said, investing should be more like watching grass grow or watching paint dry. If you want excitement, take $800 and go to Las Vegas.
I absolutely agree. You mentioned earlier a couple words, keywords, buzzwords, if I may, that really triggered this part of the conversation. You say recession resistant. What kind of investments are you in today?
So I would say that recession resistant assets would be assets that do well in good times and well in bad times. And mobile home parks have been the number one real estate asset that I'm aware of that fits that mold. Self-storage has been number two. Now, I'd also say that multifamily and healthcare would also be in that mix. They seem, you know, hospitals probably don't do much worse during bad times as good. But let me say something that's different about healthcare and multifamily from self-storage and mobile home parks, which is, by the way, to answer your question, that's where I'm investing heavily right now. The difference is fragmented ownership. Now, mom and pop owners abound in self-storage and mobile home parks. There are about 54,000 self-storage facilities in the US, and a large percentage of those are owned by mom and pop operators. There are about 44,000 mobile home parks in the US, and about 40,000, it's believed, are owned by mom and pop operators. These folks don't have the resources, the knowledge, and frankly, they don't often care to upgrade their facilities. We just acquired one where the owner hadn't even visited in 5 years or more. And so if you can acquire a mom and pop asset that has a lot of ability to upgrade, even if you buy it at a fair price, you can upgrade it. And because of the commercial real estate value formula, which is value equals net operating income divided by cap rate, because of that, you can force appreciation and dramatically upgrade your investors' returns. Now, circling back to your question, if you can dramatically increase net operating income and value in the early months of ownership, you've created a buffer in the case of recession. And so not only have you created better returns if things go well, you've created a buffer between where you are and zero if things go poorly. And that's the kind of assets we're looking for.
That's awesome. It sounds like you look for the value add in mobile homes. So
yeah, mobile home parks and self-storage both.
Awesome. With with value add in mobile homes and self-storage, what kind of value adds practices are you implementing? Because I believe everybody's more familiar with multifamily. So what are you doing in those spaces?
Yeah, I've got a chapter in my book called The Perfect Investment about value adds for multifamily. But when I heard value add for self-storage, I think I laughed out loud. I was thinking, wait a minute, it's 4 pieces of sheet metal, rivets, and a piece of concrete plus a door. Where's the value add? I can't change countertops. I can't change lighting. I can't add carpeting and fixtures and all that. But there's tremendous value adds in self-storage. For example, if you add U-Haul alone, let's do the math on one. If you add U-Haul alone, you can add approximately, let's say, for example, $3,000 to $5,000. Let's say $4,000 to your net operating income per month. Okay, so $4,000 a month. I'm pretty good at math here. Is $48,000 per year. $48,000 per year. Let's use our value add formula. Our value formula for commercial real estate. 48,000 a year divided by a cap rate of, let's say, an average cap rate of 6%. That's 0.06. Look at that. $800,000 increase in value at that self-storage. Now, what if you only paid $3 million for that self-storage and you got a $2.2 million loan and you have $800,000 in equity? My friends, you just doubled the equity. You went from 800,000 in equity to 1.6 million in equity just by adding U-Haul, which can take a number of days once you buy the facility. That's the kind of value adds our operators are quickly making. There's other things like selling locks, boxes, tape, scissors, insurance, charging late fees, bringing rents up to market is a value add. And then my favorite, which is buying, let's say, a 6-acre property that only has 3 acres of self-storage, would be adding another climate-controlled facility on land that is essentially free because you already own it. And so those are some in self-storage. Mobile home parks, I'll go through real quickly. You could rent decks, you could rent sheds, you could rent carports, you can raise the rents to market value, and you can pass water and sewer back to tenants. We recently acquired a $7.1 million mobile home park with a partner. It was February 21st this year. February 27th, about 6 days later, we got an offer for $9 million on it. Turned it down flatly because one of the value adds alone is going to take the value through the roof, and that is passing water and sewer back to the tenants. There are about 300 mobile home slots there. Passing water and sewer back to the tenants is going to generate, I believe, $213,000 a year in extra net operating income. So, using our formula, $213,000 a year divided by a 6% cap rate is generating a $3.5+ million value. So a $7.1 million park, in theory, would be worth over $10.5 million. And you, again, just doubled your equity from one value add.
I think you just doubled the content you just provided back to the PI listeners. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you.
I appreciate you, man. Thank you. One last thing. If there was one last thing you would leave for the PI listeners, what would that be? And go ahead.
I don't know. John, there's a lot of fear out there right now. I don't have to tell you that. There's a lot of dread. There's a lot of uncertainty. And if you're in your 20s or 30s, this might look like the end of the world, as I heard someone mention yesterday. It's not. This is just another blip. And this is an opportunity, potentially, depending on how long this coronavirus and stock market meltdown goes on. This could be the opportunity of a lifetime for you to create value, create wealth, and help other people in the process. And so don't panic. Remember that Warren Buffett bought American Express when its price was cut down to, I think, half of what it had been because of a scandal. And he actually invested heavily in Goldman Sachs. in 2008 when the word on the street was they were going to go belly up. And he made all kinds of other investments that made him extremely wealthy by seeing what no one else could see. That's what it means to be an oracle, and he's the Oracle of Omaha. And so I would recommend that you take a deep breath and realize that this is not the time to panic. It's the time to invest. Now, I don't mean you have to invest today, but Howard Marks made billions of dollars in the last recession, and so did Warren Buffett. And what they did is, by their own words, they caught falling knives. That means when the knife was on the way down, it's easy to pick up a knife off the floor and never get cut, but it's very hard to catch one when it's falling, and it's very scary. But you can do it, and this could be the time when you too become wealthy because of this crisis. So don't fear, and take a deep breath and realize this too shall pass.
Thank you, Paul. One last question. I didn't want to bundle it. That's why I paused earlier. Where can we find you?
Where could you find me? Okay, you can go to wellingscapital.com. That's WELLINGSCAPITAL, wellingscapital.com. You can also find me at howtolosemoney.com and my Bigger Pockets profile.
That's awesome. Paul, thank you for joining us. Thank you for sharing. I really appreciate everything you provided for my listeners today. I think the PI listeners really got a lot of value out of you. Thank you again. I appreciate you.
Thanks, John.
PI listeners, I'm grateful for your time and I appreciate you for listening. For more information, go to passiveinvestorshow.com. If any of this resonates with you, please subscribe and leave a review. The more you know, the more we grow. Thank you for tuning in. Till next time.